The aim of this presentation is to like kind of unify additivity and concessivity in the context of conditional. The intuition in here is that, in many languages, at least we have three, and that, additive particle can work either as an additive conditional or concessive conditional in the context of a conditional. So let's look at examples in through 1 to 3. In Japanese, in 1, maybe you guys are still already familiar with the Japanese conditionals thanks to Mui. But in here, in Japanese, moshi is, as Mui told us, it's kind of if thing. And we can put an additive particle mo to the end of the antecedent of the conditional. And since Japanese can drop the subject, we can just say happy, but it means I am happy. So this conditional means if Alex comes, I'm happy. But we are putting also kind of things at the end of the antecedent. And, it someone else such that if that person comes, I'll be happy too. In Mandarin, this is also the case. In Mandarin, in peculiar case about Mandarin is that, they put additive particle ye into the consequent, but we will still get the same meaning. And, we will talk about the placement of syntactic placement of this particle in the later part of this talk. But we have to, what we want to say is that, ye or also is working on the antecedent semantically. And it also, of course, it means, it is also the case that if Alex comes, I'll be happy. And the same is true for Italian too. And interestingly, in certain context, in these conditionals can mean concessive conditionals too. So in Japanese, for instance, in one can be taken as meaning that even if Alex comes, I'll be happy. So it depends on context. It depends on how you read these sentences. For instance, if you put a phonological stress in there, you'll more likely get concessive meaning, for instance. So why is this? Why in many languages concessivity is expressed by the particle which expresses additivity? That is our main question, and we want to address this question and answer this question in our talk. And concessivity can be more clearly observed in the next example we will show in 4. 4A means if Ethan comes, I'm happy in Japanese. And in 4B, we are again putting the additive particle mo at the end of the antecedent clause. And as discussed by many previous work, concessivity means that something or the predicent of the particle is less likely than something else. For instance, in this context, Alex coming is likely to lead to the consequent than Ethan's coming. So the fact, for instance, put it more less semi-formally, we can just say that, it is kind of surprising that Alex coming lead to the consequent, namely, I am happy. So for instance, maybe I don't like Alex much, and that is why it's kind of surprising. And I like Ethan, so it's always likely that Ethan's coming makes me happy, but that is not the case for Alex. And I think we can see the concessivity in here, at least we can say that, Alex coming is less likely to lead to the consequent than Ethan's coming. That's the point of concessivity. Okay, so we have seen that, again, the additivity and the concessivity are expressed by the same particle for some reason. So since they're expressed by the same particle, let's establish a connection between additivity and the concessivity in the context of conditionals. That's our goal. So roadmap in here, roadmap of this presentation is like this. I'll first talk about background, especially on scalar monotonicity discussed by Behrens and Kaufman 2009. And I will lay out a proposal, and then I will give my words to my co-author Xuetong, and she will discuss some limitation of this study. And here's a proposal in a informal way. We propose that concessivity is derived from a strong additivity, which requires an assertion to be not inferable from the context. So in fairly informal way, we want to say something like this. We have some proposition, let's say P. And this P, when you add this P in some certain context, it invokes alternatives, let's say P, P prime, P double prime, etc. And with the oversimplification, we want to say that let's suppose that P is less likely than P prime and P double prime. So scale is going to be like this. So they are put in the scale. And we want to say that P makes an inference to more likely proposition. In general, we want to say less likely proposition makes an inference to more likely proposition. And if you say, when you're using additive particle, the projectant of additive particle shouldn't be inferred by the context. And that is why the projectant of additive particle must be like less likely than the alternatives. That's our idea, but I'll illustrate it more in detail in the following. But first of all, let me talk about scalar monotonicity and the formality of the proposed invariance and Kaufman is kind of complicated. So we will not go into the exact formalization of them, but the idea is pretty simple. First of all, we know that conditionals in human language are not monotonic, as observed by Heim. Like if you see 5, if we get accepted by talk, we will go to Japan, which was our original plan. And it doesn't make an entitlement into if we get accepted by talk and the pandemic does not end, we will go to Japan. This entitlement is not valid. But in certain context or with certain antecedent, we have something like this. We have something that makes us feel like conditionals is monotonic. An example is shown in 6. So in 6a, it says if Chris only does his homework, he will pass the class. And it makes an inference to only less conditional in 6b. If Chris does his homework, he will pass the class. Now, the intuition is pretty clear, I believe, because this inference is valid because we know that the more effort you put, the more likely you are to pass the test, right? Because in 6a, antecedent says that Chris only does his homework, nothing else, only homework. That is, I believe, the minimum requirement in like every course offered in universities. And in 6b, it's still open about other possibilities, right? Of course, Chris does his homework, but he may do something else too. So, in the scale of effort, for instance, doing only his homework is more likely than doing his homework and maybe something else, right? That is the idea. So, doing his homework is more effort than doing only his homework. And since we know that the more effort you put, the more likely you'll pass the class, since only doing his homework is enough for him to pass the class, it is inferred that, of course, if you put more effort, namely doing his homework, maybe something else too, he will pass the class too. That's the intuition. And Behrens and Kaufman characterized this pattern with the scalar monotonicity. So let me talk about it. So intuition here is what I said in here. So the semi-formal format is shown in 7. In conditional if P R, the consequent is said to be scalar upward monotonic with respect to a set of P's alternative phi and the scalar ordered, the better than or more likely operator if relation, if and only if PR holds, and for all Q, which is in the alternative, if Q is more likely or Q is more effort than than P, then if Q also holds. So you can just replace P as only doing his homework and Q as doing his homework and maybe something else. Okay. And in the scale, only doing his homework is ranked lower than doing his homework and maybe something else too, right? And we are now saying that, doing his homework is a less effort and putting a less effort is good enough for him to pass the class. So we make an inference to, okay, then, if he does his homework and maybe something else, he would pass the class too. That's the intuition. Okay. So, that is in a schematic representation of the idea, So we're going back to, being a happy scenario. In the last case scenario, Ethan's coming and Alex coming scenario. In the last example, we added if Ethan comes, I'll be happy. And we put more into the if Alex comes, I'll be happy, right? And since Ethan's coming is higher ranked than Alex coming, of course. So if Ethan comes, I'll be happy. So you uttered this sentence before uttering Alex coming stuff, right? So you uttered Ethan's coming, I'll be happy. And of course, it makes an inference with respect to the alternatives of the antecedent, if the alternative antecedent is ranked higher, right? Because since Ethan's coming is enough for me to be happy. But if we have agreement that the speaker likes Beth more than Ethan, then we make an inference to if Beth comes, I'll be happy, right? As we made an inference from if Chris only does his homework, he will pass the class, to if Chris does his homework, he will pass the class, right? So the idea in here is that when we have this kind of scale, the scale which makes the consequent upward scalar monotonic, we have concessivity, we have a concessive meaning. That's gonna be the idea, because as I said, our idea is that the predicate of additive particle shouldn't be inferred by the context. So if you suppose so, then we can say something like since we said if Ethan comes, I'll be happy, and we are supposing that the skill like this is available in the context. So if Ethan comes, I'll be happy makes an inference to if Beth comes, I'll be happy, then the next utterance with the additive particle, if Alex comes more, I'll be happy, should be like ranked lower, right? Because otherwise, this conditional by itself is inferred by the context. That's going to be the idea. So, toward formalization, we have to formalize additivity first. But I believe people are familiar with that. But what additivity does is something like this. Additive particle takes an x of some type sigma as its first argument, and y of type sigma t as its second argument, requiring that y of x is true. And there's some x alternative x prime such that y of x prime is also true. So in the case of Alex also came, it's easy, and also takes Alex, which is of type E first as its argument. And it also takes BP, which is of type ET as its second argument. And then asserts that y of x is true, namely Alex game is true. And there must be some alternative of Alex in the alternative set, such that the alternative is not equivalent to Alex, namely like Beth or Kathy or Dave. And y of x prime is also true. So coming is true of some other alternative. That is the additivity meaning. And by the way, as the review of this event suggests that it might be better to put additivity requirement to the presupposition. But for simplicity, let me just suppose that this is a part of assertion. But our proposal does not hinge on this assumption. So toward the formalization again, we want to propose that the additive particle has a strong additivity that requires that the presence of the additive particle shouldn't be inferred from the context. And when the context evokes a scale, which relative to which a conditional consequent is upward monotonic, a conditional plus the additive particle results in concessivity. So here's the reasoning. So in concessive, as we saw, the antecedent P is less likely to lead to the consequent R than some P is alternative Q. So we are saying that, in the conditional, if P, R, P is less likely to lead to R than some alternative Q. And then suppose we utter if A, B first, and add information by uttering if C plus additive more B, if C more B, against a scale phi, which makes B the consequent scale upward monotonic. And suppose that A is in the alternative set phi. A is the the antecedent of the conditional which was uttered first. And the first utterance makes an inference to if small phi B to any phi in that alternative set, right? This is predicted from scalar monotonicity. If there's a scale which makes the consequent scalar monotonic, then that then there we have an inference. Since if A, B is in the starting point of the scale, then since if, for instance, small phi is ranked higher, then if phi B is inferred from this utterance. So in order to meet stronger additivity in this context, then A has to be less likely or ranked lower, less likely to lead to the consequent C. That is the idea. So schematically, it looks something like this. If Ethan comes, I'll be happy. And we add if Alex comes more, I'll be happy with the additive particle. We add if Ethan comes, I'll be happy in here. And we know that we have a scale phi, which makes the consequent a scale upward monotonic. Now, since this alternative set makes the consequent scale upward monotonic, the utterance if Ethan comes, I'll be happy makes an inference to if phi comes, if phi, I'll be happy, to any phi which is ranked higher in this alternative set. So if Ethan comes, I'll be happy makes an inference to if Beth comes, I'll be happy. And recall that in order for us to use the additive particle more felicitously, we are requiring that presence of more is not inferred by the context. And we are now inferring to if Beth comes, I'll be happy. So like we cannot use the antecedent which is ranked higher than ether coming around in here in the next utterance with the additive particle. So we have to use a lower ranked alternative in the next utterance. That's going to be the idea, and that is how additivity additivity derives the concessivity. And we can do a formalization. Let's suppose that context C is Stalnaker's context set, which is a set of walls obtained by intersecting propositions that participants of a conversation believe to be true. For instance, in the current context, since we utter if Ethan comes, I'll be happy, this conditional by itself is in the context set, of course. And let's say that additivity is defined almost similar to what people have assumed as we reviewed before, but differ in the last requirement. We are putting that requirement that y of x, which is in this context conditional, shouldn't be inferred from the context. So in the previous example, since we have a conditional, if Ethan comes out to be happy in the context, we cannot use again higher ranked conditional. That is the idea. Okay, so what kind of prediction do we make in this proposal? The first prediction is that when a set of alternatives are available in C and that set of alternatives make the consequent scale up monotonic, additivity may induce the concessive meaning even without the preceding sentence. For instance, in context, let me assume that since 11, or in the first example, we saw the 1, 2, or 3 Italian example, concessivity can be induced even without the preceding sentence. So why is this? This is because, since let me assume that, in context, there is an alternative conditional that is safe to be true because the antecedent is ranked high enough. So, we kind of, it's a common sense that if you like some person pretty much, then that person's coming makes you happy, right? So we have some conditional which can be assumed to be true in certain context. And, the antecedent or conditional to be uttered with additive particle has to be ranked low enough not to be inferred by such a safe conditional to be assumed. The second prediction is that when the available scale does not make the consequent scale upward monotonic, then additivity means just an additivity. Although we require strong additivity, if there's no scale up that makes the consequent upward monotonic, we only see the effect of additivity. And actually, in Japanese, at least, it's pretty hard to find such an example. But here's a nice example from the recipe book of cooking, or some sort. Like if you read the instruction, hey, if you add salt, it's going to be good. And then if in the next line you see, hey, it is also the case that if you add lemon, it's going to be good too. It's just adding some information. We are not making any scale in this context. So although we have more here, additive particle in here, we do not see any effect of concessivity or strong additivity in this here. So we don't see concessivity in here because we do not have any scale, which makes the consequent scalar upward monotonic in this context. That was a prediction. So wrapping up, we had a scalar additivity, which requires the consequent or a conditional not to be inferred from the context. And only when a context evokes a scale that makes the consequent scalar upward monotonic, we see the effect of strong additivity and see the concessivity. So in this way, we can derive this concessivity from additivity. So we don't need any lexical ambiguity in here. That can be a welcome result, we believe. And then, next Xuetong will talk about some limitation of this study. So let me give her this slide.
Hello, everyone. I'm Xuetong. So I'm going to take over the rest of the talk. So before we get into discussions and limitation part, let us first add a note on the Mandarin data here, because we got this from one of our reviewers, thanks to our reviewers. So unlike Japanese more, Mandarin EA is not attached to the conditional antecedent, but it is in the consequent. So here in order for the particle to take scope over the antecedent, here we take the assumption that E is high in the IP domain, and we would like to provide two pieces of evidence for this. And the first piece of evidence comes from the linear order of E with respect to the Mandarin future morpheme Jiang and other model auxiliaries. So this is shown in 13A. 李四明天将会去日本，张三明天也将会去日本。So this sentence means Li Si will go to Japan tomorrow. Zhang San will go to Japan. Zhang San will also go to Japan tomorrow. Okay. So here we can see that Ye can precede Jiang, but Ye cannot be added after will or after the future morpheme Jiang. Okay. So next text is about the relative order between the Mandarin only 指 and 也. So this is 13B. Here we see that 张三也指借书. This is fine, but we cannot say 张三指也借书. That's awful. So as we can see again here, 也 precedes the only 指, but it cannot be added after only. Okay. So the second piece of evidence comes from the scope between Ye and models. So if it is a case that Ye is really high in the IP domain, then we should be able to see that, for example, in 14, not only should John come, he must come. We should be able to see that the model can receive the focus. Okay, and here is what is actually happening in Mandarin. 约翰不仅应该来，也必须来. This is fine. So here we give this evidence to show that actually Ye is high in the IP domain, so that they can take scope over the antecedent following Crosser in 1986. Okay, so then in the next part, we're going to talk about three, basically the limitations of this study. So the number one is, at what time is this likeliness should be evaluated, right? Is this being evaluated at the point the speaker uttered the sentence, or it is being evaluated in a more general sense? So here we have another example. So suppose that there are two people, Alex and Bill. Okay, Alex always has a good luck, whereas Bill always has bad luck. Okay, so now there's a lottery such that everyone who buys a ticket wins at least $10. Okay, so then here we have 15. This is in Japanese, but the sentence means even if Bill buys it, he will win $10. So as we can see here, we also have the additive particle in the antecedent. And the sentence receives a concessive reading. So here we are trying to say that this concessive reading comes from, does not come from this particular case, but it comes from a more general context. So that is for this case. And for the second limitation, we are trying to extend our current theory outside of conditionals. That is to say, in the normal assertions, declaratives, sometimes these additive particles can also receive concessive reading. So this is in number 16. Bill ga kita, Alex mo kita. So this sentence means Bill came. It can also mean even Alex came, or also Alex came. So it can receive both additive meaning and the concessive meaning. Okay. However, outside of conditionals, it's not very transparent for us to see how to straightforwardly adapt the idea of Behrens and Kaufman on 2009. So here we have a very rough idea. The idea is that we say that the strong additivity actually requires that the precision should not be contextually told. And here's the story. So if we have a scale that is ordered with respect to the contextual entailment, then we will get this concessivity. Okay. So again, here we have a scale, and the scale is suppose that whenever, not really whenever, if Alex came, and it's generally the case that Bill came, Kathy came, Dave came. So this is like the contextual, it's a scale with respect to the contextual entailment. And so the reasoning is as follows. Suppose that a set of alternatives shown above are ordered with respect to what we call the contextual entailment. And Bill came contextually entails the higher ranked alternatives. So then in using the additive particle, the precision has to be ranked low enough. And if the precision is ranked low enough, then we get what we call the concessive reading. And if we don't really have this contextual entailment in the context, then we only receive pure additive reading. So that's the idea. Okay. Okay, so here is our last part. We're also curious about how to unify the meaning of the additive particles in Japanese and Mandarin. And it is very famous that for Japanese particle mo, it also has a universal quantification use. It can also be used as for example, minimizer, not only one, or it can be used in the case like in the maximal number, such as many as 100 people came. right? However, this is not the case with Mandarin yet, especially in the quantification, universal quantification case and the maximal number case, we are using a different particle though. Right? So this is actually our next step of the project. We are curious about what actually makes more different from yet. And to make them more specific, what exactly is the additional job that Mo can do? And it will be desirable for us if there is some tiny difference that we can observe. Yeah, and we actually have some ideas, very general ideas, and we have already put it in the appendix. So if anyone is curious about this point, we can talk about it in the Q&A session. But this is already the end of our talk, and thank you so much for listening.
Okay, thank you very much. We have a fair amount of time for questions, so let me hang on a second, get the list of people up here so I can see who's. Okay, questions, please. Yime.
Thank you for the talk. Very nice. I first want to just ask the major concept introduced about strong additivity, because it seems different from what I usually understand. So to my understanding, when people talking about additivity, they are referring to an alternative of the prejacent of the additive particle. So it's not the prejacent sentence itself, it's something else. But since that what you are saying here is the prejacent sentence itself, and this sentence is sort of new in the context. It's not somehow it's not implied by the context. Is that the idea?
Are you going to take it or?
I can take it. Yes, that is the idea. Of course, we are still keep the traditional, let me say, additivity too, right? In the lexical entry, we are requiring that, of course, the prejacent is true and something else is also true. The strong additivity in here is, as you said, the requirement on the prejacent by itself. Yeah, I think that is the idea.
So it's sort of like a novelty of this.
Yeah, definitely. Because our original intuition, I forgot to tell about it, but our original intuition is that since you're adding the information in the context, you truly add information to the context. And if you're adding something that is already known, you are not adding information to the context at all. That is our intuition, and we just semantically encoded the requirement in the entry.
Yeah, thanks for the clarification. So I have just two follow-up points about that. One is that why this this assumption is unique, it's specific to additive particles, because you can imagine that whenever you want to make an assertion, you don't want this assertion to be redundant. So we always sort of, if you have assertion, then you want it to be novel. So that might be, I would imagine that's to be independent of the use of the additive particle. And the second point is that I'm thinking about data like someone, so imagine we have a conversation and one says, John passed the exam. And the other speaker says, wow, even John passed the exam, or say, oh, John also passed the exam. So it's like the context, if the speaker believes each other, the context already entails the prejacent. But still, just because the second speaker wants to add something, they can naturally add the particle even or also without sounding odd. Yeah, so those are my 2 points.
You want to take it?
Yeah.
Because
Right. I would like to take the first question, your first bullet point. Yeah, your first follow-up question. So, what we have in mind is that additive particle indicates like a necessary condition, that is something must be new, and this is something that assertions do not have. Just as what you have just said, if you have already uttered John passed exam, and then you can still say even John passed exam, and other people can always repeat the same sentence. That's not like a limitation, like not like a requirement for the context. But what additive particles add on to is necessary to be new.
But like the use of also is also the case. So say one says John passed the exam. There's a person who, wow, John also passed the exam. That sounds okay to me, even we're using the particle also.
Yeah, I think so too. So, I mean, the point in here is that, okay, so my gut feeling, because I still do not have an account for that, but gut feeling in here is that you are still adding information because you are adding the information that the someone else also passed. That information is new in this context, right? So that is added. So as I said, maybe our requirement on the additivity has to be relaxed so that additive meaning in here should also be counted for the new information in here. I think that is a direction we can go to account for your data.
Thank you. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, next is Nori Hayashi.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, my question is about the second limitation of your analysis in page, I don't know, 39
39.
for the PDF. Yeah. So in 17, you have two propositions. The first one is Bill came, and in addition to Bill, Alex also came. And you said that Bill came, which is the antecedent of the additivity, came contextually entails the higher ranked alternatives, such as Dave came and Kathy came. But I'm not sure whether we really want to make commitment to those higher ranked alternative, but because there may be Dave, it might be Dave might haven't come because for some other reason, and for some good reasons. So my question is whether this makes any problem to your analysis here.
Talk about a model thing if you want.
Yeah, if we are understanding your question correctly, is you're saying that we shouldn't commit to the scale, to the.
You can commit to the scale, but it might not be safe to commit the actual proposition like Dave came or Kathy came. So
I guess,
Yeah,
yeah. Actually, I totally agree. First of all, contextual entailment so far means nothing, right? Because we haven't defined it. So here's, I don't know if we have the slide, but here's some kind of idea. So in the real formalization of scalar upward monotonicity by Behrens and Kaufman, they need a modality, of course, because they are talking about conditional. So the idea was like, they order the alternatives. Let's suppose we are looking at an P in that scale. If P, let me say, if the best P world is good enough to lead to the consequent, best world, we mean, kind of assuming ordering source in here. But, the best P world with respect to ordering source and model base, which is available in the context, is good enough to lead to the consequent, then the best P prime world, let's say P prime is ranked higher than the antecedent. The best P prime world is also good enough to lead to the consequent. That was the original idea, or the formalized idea by Behrens and Kaufman. So you're right. We do not want to commit to the entitlement. Then how can we extend to our proposal to outside conditional? Maybe we can modelize our scale in certain sense. So for instance, instead of talking about actual entitlement, we can kind of make an epistemic sense into the ordering of the scale. For instance, if you are believing that, Bill is coming is less likely than Kathy is coming, that's an epistemic sense. So we can say that, in the best world where Bill came, then Kathy will also came. Like, in the world.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I think this is a promising way to get out of the limitation. Yeah, and this reminds me of von Fintel's 2000 analysis of whatever, in which you have the assertion, an assertion, and in addition to the assertion, you get some additional two-dimensional conditional implication. And yeah.
Yes, because actually, we didn't know about that paper. At least I didn't know it. So thank you for pointing it out, and we'll definitely take a look at it. Thank you, and that is a good point. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Okay, Yinan Sun.
Hi. Thanks for the interesting talk. So I don't really have a question. I just want to point to like use of ye, which I used to feel like really mysterious, and I kind of feel your analysis here is quite promising in terms of extend the analysis to that part of the data. So at least in Mandarin, there's a very mysterious use of ye, which I feel really is a concessive use, like 我也不讨厌它，或者我也不讨厌句法，但是我不是很喜欢 or 你也不小了. So first of all, I don't know if Japanese small also has this mysterious use. So I used to feel like it's very mysterious because it's not very clear where the additive is, there, because there's no, for me, it's not very salient that there's any alternative. Like when you say 我也不讨厌他, it's not saying that someone else is like also don't like him. So my question is, it's not a question, it's just like if you have any thoughts about this. So I kind of feel like you can extend the use by saying we also have a scale of about, I don't know, contextual entailment or the degree of hating or liking something. And you're kind of saying, when I say I don't, 我也不讨厌句法, I also don't hate syntax. There's a set of other alternatives that need to be true, and they're contextually stronger than this. But I kind of don't understand, like, if we kind of relax the definition of contextual entailment to those kinds of contexts, I'm not very clear, like, first of all, what's the ordering of the scale is and how that is really like gives rise to a concessive flavor. Because like for instance, in one example you mentioned, which is also a concessive outside of conditionals, like John also can, for that example, I'm already having a hard time, like why the less likelihood is related to concessive flavor, like concessive meaning, and same in the examples I just mentioned, like 我也不讨厌句法. So first of all, I'm not quite sure like what the scale of the propositions are, and second, like I don't know like how that could straightforwardly explain our feeling that it's a concessive use. So yeah.
Okay. Let me first clarify one thing. So if I think I can take it as two questions. The first one, you say 我也不讨厌句法. Do you really feel that it has a concessive meaning? Don't have a very strong feeling that it's concessive. Like
I kind of feel it's like a kind of more a bit polite use, and I feel like politeness is related to concessive. Yeah, so that comes back to one of my questions. I don't really understand what concessive is in different situations.
That's something that I will I think we can directly actually extend our proposal of stronger additivity to this case, because we can say that what EA is doing here is basically we're imposing something new that cannot be inferred, and we want to make it explicitly, something like that. But I'm not very sure that it really has something to do with the scale. That's the part I'm not pretty sure. But I agree that these uses are very mysterious. I haven't thought about this, and I'm not sure whether this can be used in other languages as well. Yeah.
Does Japanese have this similar use?
I mean, I didn't get
I
a
need to-
Mandarin pad, so could you translate it in English?
Yeah.
I don't
So
like syntax either.
I don't like syntax either.
yeah,
I
but that
don't like
doesn't mean
syntax
like
either.
there's someone else like in the
I mean, I don't like syntax either. So I
Wait,
mean, you were putting focus on syntax or
No,
subject.
no. That's not the meaning, right? That's not what the sentence mean, right? You know, that's
no.
It's yeah. I will.
I kind of feel it's a concessive because it feels polite. It's like I don't like syntax either, but although I don't love it, I don't like, but like yeah. So I kind of just a suggestion. I just felt like your analysis can extend to that use.
Yeah, I get
with some extension. Yeah, just
I'm not really. I completely, I totally agree with you. I can see how the stronger additivity can be extended to this case, but I'm not sure if it's relevant to the scale. That's my feeling. But yeah, definitely. We will look at it. I need to translate this sentence first to him, and we will see how it goes. And with respect to your second one, because you're saying you're not very sure about the pure additive, not really pure additive, but additive particles with the outside of conditionals, whether it has to do with the scale, right?
Yeah, like I don't see why 17 here the use is related to consistent.
Oh yeah, so for example, we say Bill 来了, Alex 也来了. So in principle, Alex doesn't seem to be more likely to come than Bill.
Okay, so
surprisingly, Alex 也来了. So I can see how concessive it is. Like, right.
So it's like concessive. So it's like less likelihood is.
Yeah, it's even. It's like even Alex. Yeah. Alex. Yeah.
Okay,
yeah.
even. Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Right.
Okay. Yeah, I guess that answers my question. So you can kind of paraphrase it into even. Okay.
Yeah, I'm translating it into even, but I feel like if for example, I emphasize on the person, right? In Mandarin, when I say Bill 来了, Alex 也来了. Usually Alex, whenever Alex comes, Bill comes. Then if you say Bill, no, whenever Bill comes, Alex comes, then you say Bill 来了, Alex 也来了.
Okay. Yeah, thanks for the clarification.
Let's take a question from Mam too.
Yeah. Someone is.
I believe we have a question from the in-person audience.
Yeah, I saw a hand.
Yes.
Okay, so I am in the in-person venue. My name is Junri. So I have some questions regarding scalar upward monotonicity. So in 6, you say that if Chris only does his homework, he will pass the class at 6. So you say that 6A entails 6B, right? So actually, maybe I'm odd, but I don't really share that intuition, because so some type of homework is open-ended. You can do like, for example, like some kind of exercise. You can do so maybe you can do that like as long as you want. So that kind of homework exists. So in I guess if you only do the homework, then you will spend all your time on that. So that is more effort than just doing some homework. So so for if Chris does his homework and for the 6B sentence, that leaves open the possibility of Chris playing video games or something like that. So So actually I got the reverse I don't know entailment. I mean in a way. But anyway, so that's one thing. But another thing is, so for 6, I see that these two sentences are somehow related. But for the if Ethan comes, I'll be happy, and if Alex comes, I'll be happy. So I think the scenario is that Ethan is more likely to come and Alex is less likely to come, right? But I don't know how how these two sentences are related, because just because Ethan is more likely to come doesn't mean that you know, if Alex comes, I'll be happy, and tells that if Ethan comes, I'll be happy, because you assume that you'll be happy whoever comes, but maybe you like Alex, but you hate Ethan. So even though Ethan is more likely to come, you might hate that if he comes, right? So I don't know how these so it seems like the case in 6 and the the case you're considering it seems to be different to begin with.
Okay, so let me try answer in a time. So first of all, about the first question, with namely if 6A entails 6B, the answer is no. This is definitely not entailment. I mean, entailment should be like, entailment should hold in every context, but of course, but by definition. But in this case, Behrens and Kaufman sticks to the terminology inference, and we also stick to terminology inference. This is because this is not entailment. I mean, this relation 6A makes an inference to 6B is pretty context sensitive. Like, as I said, as we said, if we have a scale that makes the context consequent upward monotonic scale upward monotonic, then we have this inference. And I think this already answers your second point, in which maybe homework is kind of open-ended, and 6B opens up the possibility that Chris also does video games and then Instagramming, whatever it is, these kind of things too, in which he wastes much time. Of course it does, but as I said, this inference only holds when we have a scale in which doing his homework is ranked higher in effort scale than doing only his homework. So now we are talking about, when we are ordering the alternatives of an antecedent, in this particular context, we are now talking about the effort scaling here, So, since we have an intuition that the more effort you put, the more likely to pass the test, we are now putting in a proposition, doing his homework is ranked higher than doing only his homework, ignoring the possibility that he may do Instagramming or Netflixing, blah, blah, blah. I think that is the thing. And for the second part, the Ethan's coming thing, I think I put this in a pretty bad way. So let me just clarify what our intuition is. So we have a scale in here, and likeliness is kind of, let me just, likeliness, let me just put likeliness aside. So let's suppose, when, or about, let's say, let's put likeliness in a different way. We are ordering the alternative sum of antecedent in a scale, and a scale of the likeliness to lead me to be happy. So we are not talking about the likelihood of Alex coming per se, but we are talking about the likeliness of Alex coming to make me happy. Or we can just, translate into another language, like, since we have some intuition that the more people you like, the more likely you will be happy by that person's coming than if you like Alex less than Ethan or Beth, or in other words, if you like Ethan or Beth more like more than Alex, then you are more likely to be happy by Ethan's coming, right? So let's put the scale in this way. We are not talking about the likelihood of the coming by itself. We are talking about the likelihood of relative to the consequent always. So in this way, I guess, you can see the idea, since the Ethan's coming is enough to make me happy, and since Beth's coming is more likely to make me happy, Ethan's coming, if Ethan comes, I'll be happy. This conditional makes an inference to if Beth is coming, I'll be happy. And it does not make an inference to if Alex is coming, I'll be happy. Does it make it clear?
Yes, but but you call that inference? So I think that makes sense for you as a speaker because who will make you happy, but your whoever you're talking to might have no idea like who will make you happy, right? So I think for the homework, maybe the speaker and the hearer might share the context, right? That's, I mean, so they both know what kind of homework is assigned and etc. But so this yes, well, so it seems a little different to me, but maybe not. I'm not sure, but.
Okay, so like I think I got your point. Like I mean, in homework case, we have a shared knowledge that the more effort you put, blah blah blah. Thing.
Yes. So my point is that you can use this kind of sentence. If Alex が来ても嬉しい. I mean, you can use this sentence regardless of whether the hearer knows anything about your personal preferences. I don't know if it matters or not, but.
Yes, I think so. Okay, so I think I got the point. So I mean, okay. So like, I think you're saying that, for this case to work, we have to, let me put it in the informal way. We have to like, make an inference to ourselves, like, right? It's inference to about ourselves. It's not gonna be inference to the heroes, right? The hero will not get this inference because, we are talking about ourselves, the speaker. I think that's your point. Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay. Actually, we haven't thought about it. Maybe we can like, patch some technical fix for that. So let us think about it more carefully, But thank you for pointing that out. We'll definitely think about it. That's a good point.
Thank you.
Okay, I have a follow-up that's related to that. So in English, I was thinking you didn't actually get these same effects with to, but I think the difference is this. If you make the scale explicit, Alex, I really don't like, but if Alex comes through, I'll be happy. You can actually get this kind of concessivity to come out. But if the scale isn't already explicit, you can't use to bring bring out that concessive interpretation. But you can do that with mo. So mo seems to be different from to in that respect. I'm wondering if maybe the difference is that English has an even that is explicitly used for bringing out concessivity, and Japanese, I don't know if it has anything other than mo for doing that. But I think that's directly related to Junri's point that some things can be used to bring out, if you will, the existence of the scale that you're implicitly using, Japanese mo, but other things that have the same kind of semantics don't work pragmatically that way.
Yeah, okay, thank you for the point. I mean, let me say, unfortunately, we have some, particle that properly expresses even meaning, namely sae. So, but then my gut feeling is that, sae is kind of high register. I wouldn't say it's high register, but, I wouldn't use it in the colloquial speech of Japanese. So maybe we want to avoid using it. I don't know, we still do not actually have an account for English data, so let us think about it. Of course, we
Yeah,
want
but
to, incorporate English data too.
Yeah, but it's a really good point. Yeah.
Yeah, that's really a good
Let
point.
us think about it. Yeah.
Yeah.